Let's practice. One of the things that I find such a powerful Jewish component of this practice, or rather, a Jewish way of thinking about mindfulness practice, is to take our cue for our practice from the calendar. And there's so much deep wisdom in the flow of our holidays. I'm sure those of you who join this and those of you who are involved in Jewish life, you know this. There's such a rich flow to the seasons, to the year, to the calendar. And in our mindfulness practice, we can engage in living it and experiencing it, as opposed to, just thinking about it or doing, observing it. Those things are great, but there's another level to it of really inhabiting the qualities of the season. So we find ourselves now in this rich moment in between Purim and Pesach, and it's an interesting flow. It's an interesting time, and as Josh said at the start, there's an especially rich time that connects Pesach to Shavuot, the 7 weeks plus 1 day of the Omer. But this comes before that, and I wanted to raise up some elements in our practice today that I think may be a key of working with and experiencing this flow from Purim to Pesach. Jet, whenever you're able, please share the text. Thank you. And I know that there will be a link to this so that you could download it. This is a text that comes from Likutei Moharan, teachings of Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, a really rich, amazing, far out text. And this is a text that I think gives a really interesting insight into the emotional, spiritual flow from Purim to Pesach. So I'm going to just read it quickly and then highlight a few pieces that we can then integrate into our practice. Ach da, she'al yedei marash chora, אי אפשר להנהיג את המוח כרצונו. But know that an experience of bitter despondency, I'll come back to that in a second, keeps one from guiding the mind in the direction that one wills. This idea of bitter despondency, marash chora, is likely referring to one of the four humors, that ancient, I believe, Greek system of understanding these four different kind of energies, orientations within the body, moods. It manifests in many different forms. But here Rabbi Nachman is saying, and I think we can just think of it as like sadness, perhaps even depression. But the language has, it is a language of bitterness, like bile, which was connected with this humor. If you're feeling this, he says, it keeps one from guiding the mind in the direction that one wills. Ve'al chen kashe lo leishev et dato. It makes it difficult to settle one's awareness, to settle one's mind. This idea of settling one's mind is a really powerful idea. And I'm sure anybody who's here resonates with it as part of what we're trying to do in this practice. The Mishnah actually says that wise sages, old Torah sages, would manifest this quality of a settled awareness, a settled mind. And Rabbi Nachman is saying here that somehow sadness keeps us from guiding our mind and in a direction that we may want, and therefore we're not able to have a settled mind. And he says, Rak al yedei simcha yuchal lanhig et hamoach kirtono, v'yuchal leishev dato. Only by means of joy can a person lead the mind where one wants and thus settle the mind. I'll just finish in English. Joy represents the world of freedom, of cherut, olam ha-cherut, as in ki besimcha tetzeu, for in joy will you go forth, quoting the prophet Isaiah. It is by means of joy that a person becomes free and goes forth from exile. When the mind is linked to joy, then that mind and awareness become free and no longer in exile. Then one can guide the mind by the will, and one can settle one's awareness. So let me go back and unpack this a little bit more. So Purim is a time, and actually the whole month of Adar is seen as a time of simcha, of joy. And in a moment, I want to just touch upon, very importantly, what do we mean by simcha, by joy, and how might we relate to this quality in our practice? Because it may be different than our conventional, typical ways of thinking about what it means to experience simcha. But Rabbi Nachman says that only by means of joy can a person lead the mind where one wants. So there's a way in which when we feel joy, we're able to, we're more empowered, or we at least feel more empowered to direct our mind as we will. And there's Rabbi Nachman develops this idea elsewhere in Likutei Moharan, and he talks about the ways in which sadness keeps somebody constricted and sort of like tied down. And when you're feeling that, you're not able to do anything other than kind of push against those constrictions and just feeling them. And so he says, joy, simcha, actually enables you to have the freedom to think differently, to experience your life differently. I know this resonates with my experience for sure. When I'm feeling happy, when I'm feeling at ease, it's way easier for me to think hard thoughts, or to push myself to feel open to somebody, or to think differently, to change my mind. When I'm feeling sad or embattled, so hard to change my mind. But when I'm feeling joyful and open, much easier to direct my mind in different places. And so Rabbi Nachman says, joy gives us freedom, and that is actually going to help us go out of our exile of not feeling at home, and enable us to go out of that place and towards a place of freedom. When a mind is linked to joy, then that mind and awareness become free, no longer in exile, and then you can guide your mind, and then you can achieve a settled awareness. So in our practice today, my invitation is to try this a bit. And key to this is how we define simcha. And then, as you may have picked up, right, that's sort of Purim to Pesach, joy of Purim to the freedom of Pesach. The joy is preparing us for this experience of freedom, and we can touch it in our practice. And so in our practice, one way that we can experience joy is not like a kind of exuberance, but a kind of calm, settled, it's a more subtle joy. But key to it, in my experience, is that this is a joy that is not conditional. It is unconditional. It is not dependent upon things being perfect, things being solved, things being just right. And so instead of thinking, for me to sit in joy right now, I have to finish my to-do list. I have to figure out that big problem in my life. No, all those things can wait the 20 more minutes, 15 more minutes we have. Right now, we can touch this moment of experience with a quality of joy that is settled, and that is kind of a subtle joy that isn't dependent upon things being just so. So my invitation is just to sit, to breathe, to notice what arises, to return back to breath in this moment, and to see if you can hold all of it with this subtle quality of joy, lightness, warmth, letting go. If you need to say to yourself, like, forget it, like forget all these problems, just say it. You'll come back to them. Give yourself the gift of touching this moment with joy, with simcha, so that the mind can be free and settled. I'll ring a bell now, and we'll sit for about 12 minutes, and I'll ring a bell at the end. Enjoy. I hope it's a sweet period of practice. As we sit and breathe, perhaps you can let a gentle smile appear on your face if it feels comfortable to you to do that. And no matter what you're feeling, including sadness, a sense of loss, the invitation for this practice is just to hold it, hold whatever it is you're experiencing with maybe a microscopic bit more of joy that flows from just being alive in this moment.
Right. Thank you, Jordan. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much. I hope everybody, those who can, will stick around and we'll have a chance to talk about your experience with the practice and offer any reflections or questions. And in the meantime, before we do that, we want to give an opportunity for those who are saying Kaddish to do so. And so if you want in the chat to share the name of anyone that you are have in mind or heart as you're reciting Kaddish today, and we'll put the text up on the screen, and then we'll invite you to unmute and we can recite Kaddish together. Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabba, Alma Divra, Chayechon, Yomechon, V'chayei Kol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, V'zman Karid, V'imru, Amen. Hey Shmei Rabba Mevarach, Le'olam, Amen. Barach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yifar v'yitkaleh v'yimei b'kudsha brichu v'ela mikol birchata v'shirata v'ushbechata v'nechemata amiran b'alma v'imru amen. Shlama Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al Yisrael v'imru Yiseh shalom b'mamav, Yaseh shalom aleinu v'al Yisrael v'al Yoshvei Tevel v'imru. Amen.
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 Right. So thank you. And now we have about 15 minutes to have a conversation with Jordan and with everybody here about the teaching and the practice today. Jordan, thanks for bringing Rabbi Nachman to us and helping us make this transition between Purim, which we observed last week, and Pesach that's coming up. And I thought it was so, to me, it's, I think I may have quoted here recently, I don't remember, I had a visit with Sylvia Borstein last month, and Sylvia, in her inimitable, very understated way, told me, that one of her early realizations as she was developing her practice was she's like, I just can't be happy when I'm pissed. Which I just thought was like so, brilliantly simple. But right? And there's something I think to what Rabbi Nachman is saying here also about like the simcha as this condition almost for our ability to be free, for our ability to be responsive in the ways we want to be responsive. And I wonder how how you feel that showing up in your own experience, and for the rest of everybody to share, their own experience with that. How is that true, and how do you try to cultivate that sort of sense of simcha?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the crux of this practice. I love that teaching from Sylvia. I thank you for sharing that. To me, the key is that this has to be, in order for this to work for me, here's what I know it can't be. It's not like it's not just like dumping sugar in everything. I do a lot of cooking, and so maybe just thinking about this naturally, like as a cook, if you're making a stew or soup, it can really enhance the flavors if it's a savory soup, to put in a little bit of sugar or a little bit of honey. You're not turning it into like a candy. You're not turning it into like a sweet thing. And I think about this practice of simcha similarly. It's not saying like, I don't care how you're feeling. You may have just experienced horrible loss. You may be in deep depression. I don't care. Be happy right now. Like, that doesn't work. It does not work. I'm inclined, I love the way Ellen Liu talks about it in This Is Real and You Are Completely Unprepared in the context of Sukkot, Zman Simchatenu, the time of our rejoicing. And he describes it as a joy that is like, it's not like exuberance, it's like feeling the fullness of life. I asked my dear teacher mentor Sheila Peltz-Weinberger about this, and um, did I say Weinberger? Weinberg? Um, and she was like, it's not like it's subtle. It's about heart being open, and it's about the way I understand what she said is it's like a subtle inclining of your heart towards that place of warmth and kindness towards oneself and towards one's experience, and then of course also to those around us and the world around us. But it's subtle, and I know that even when I'm in a difficult place, when I'm angry, when I'm afraid, when I'm sad, the pouring a trying to pour a ton of sugar into that doesn't help, but to kind of slightly incline my heart towards that warmth and goodness is really powerful. And I can do it through things like mindfully drinking a cup of coffee and just really enjoying that taste, or often like going outside and just going for a walk and like looking at something beautiful. Uh, there are things I could do to bring in a little bit of sweetness that honors the fullness of what I'm feeling, and helps me also move forward in a way that in which I'm more empowered and free. Oh, there are a bunch of questions. You're muted.
Oh, sorry, excuse me. A lot of good stuff coming on the chat, and some questions about trauma and some questions about like sort of righteous anger, and sort of integrating all of this. I mean, Jordan, I think your point about the sort of subtlety of it, and there was a point that Ricky made about age. I was at the symphony on Sunday, and the conductor is a 95-year-old conductor, a legendary guy named Herbert Blomstead, was conducting the Chicago Symphony, and 95 years old. I mean, like, pretty incredible. And what I was struck by, he had to sit, he had to be accompanied out to walk, to get to the podium, and he had to sit at the podium, which you don't usually see. Usually the conductor's standing. But I was so struck by this, with all of that, he was still able, with these very subtle gestures. I mean, he is not a young man and like, flapping around. He's no like Leonard Bernstein, right? Just these very subtle sort of hand gestures, was able to just summon this amazing sound, like just, yeah, amazing. And I think of that subtlety that you're talking about. There's a certain sort of, it's no less profound. In fact, it's like sort of even more profound. It's like this wisdom that comes with age that, just, you could just see it, with that subtlety. And I think about that subtlety of the motion, the heart motion that's involved there. And just, yeah, that it amplifies that it's not all about the grand gesture necessarily, right? It's about these very important subtle moves that really like hit the essence of what we're after.
My wife's Bubby Goldie is Kanena going strong at 98, and we live close to her. So we see her pretty regularly, and she is a master of this. If you watch her looking at her great grandkids, her grandkids, eating some soup, it doesn't matter what it is. There's a subtle, profound joy that you can see in her face. And interestingly, right, I mentioned this earlier, the Mishnah also says this quality of Yishuv Hadat, settled mind, was for like the elderly wise sages, and there was a quality of like deep maturity to this to this quality, that
Mhm.
it's something that comes with experience. It's not like a youthful joy. It's a more serene, subtle joy that we can
Mm,
identify with our beloved elders. Uh,
mm.
doesn't mean everybody at that age has that, of course. And it's not like everybody, one person is it or isn't. These are things are, complex. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
about Bubby Goldie with this quality.
I want to make sure there's been a couple of questions that definitely want a response. One is from Susan about, hi, Susan, here in Chicago. Can you comment on Rabbi Nachman, who we know suffered from depression, writing about joy and despondency?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Um, the quick answer is that Um, I would highly suggest reading Rabbi Arthur Green's book, Tormented Master, if you haven't, which is a biography of Rabbi Nachman, and a significant amount delves into this. His psychology, to the best that we can kind of understand it, um, played mightily into his Torah and to his approach. It's very complicated. I would not say that I'm like a real expert on answering this, but clearly he was struggling with this, and when he writes about marash chora, which I translated here as bitter despondency, he was writing from experience. That's, I think, pretty clear. And so, what did it mean to him to cultivate joy from that place? Um, I would like to believe that it's something like we're talking about, that it was something that was subtle and not just like dumping a whole bunch of sugar on a sad, dark place.
Mhm. Mm. Yeah, and that's probably also related to Lori's question here about like sort of, she shares anger, especially at injustice, can feel so all consuming in body and mind. This practice allowed me a lovely respite, allowing joy to also have voice and presence beside the anger at the table of all emotions. The question is, how do we reintegrate once the sit is over, when the strong anger returns to the front position? Take
Yeah,
that one, Jordan.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Such an important question. I, I think my sense for this is that um, I try to really operate in a way that affirms multiple realities operating simultaneously. And what I mean by that is, I think a great way to think about that, a helpful way perhaps, certainly a Jewish way, is that it's like there is Shabbat and there's the week. And there's even the idea, and they're different. They're very different. Um, the world of Shabbat is about affirming that we're already at home, we're already complete, we're already fixed. There's nothing to do. But that's only 1/7. 6/7 of our time is about affirming that the world is broken, and we do need to fix and build and make and figure out and create, and that's holy. And on Shabbat, affirming that there's nothing to do, nothing to fix. We're just witnesses of the glory of creation. That is holy. And so, in terms of bringing these things together, like that's the crux. And I think I very much believe, and I try to practice. I think that, from the Hasidic perspective, it's like there's this idea of ratzo v'shov, of running and returning. It's like an oscillation that we're flowing between these two realities. We're affirming that both are there, and maybe not in equal measure. So maybe it's like I need to bring in a dose of this kind of simcha so that I can deal with all this hard stuff. And there are a lot of ways in which we can think about that. And I think actually that ways in which we should be thinking about it, and I'm sure you are already. This practice is ideal in doing this, like returning from like a reality of brokenness to a reality of affirming wholeness, and then going back. Like I can touch it. I got 30 minutes in the middle of the day. I can touch it. It is so healthy because then I go back and it's like, what's holy? I'm engaged in this work of fixing and healing and building and figuring out. And now it's a bit more informed by the fact that I touch that reality. And so I need to give myself permission in my meditation practice, as I do, to go into it and to let go of all that stuff I need to do and I feel upset about and whatever. I have to let go of it so that I can come and touch this other side of my human experience. Because I know how important it is to have it with me when I return back. So it's this real oscillation. And it's not like, oh, I'm going to go here and I'm just going to stay here now forever and pretend like there are no problems in the world. That is not what this practice is about.
Yeah. There's some other great comments that are coming in here. The Shekhinah, about all of that, and I should say, like, I think it's also important for us to say there are degrees of depression, right? And there are different kinds of sadness, and and when someone is in a deep pervasive clinical sort of situation, I don't think we want to minimize and say that any particular thing is necessarily that this is supposed to be like helpful, or that different things are going to work for different people and different things are sometimes not going to work, and so nothing is a magic bullet, and we don't want to make that make that claim. But these kinds of practices, obviously from our own experience, from you should try it out in your life and you'll see what works for you. But for a lot of people, these can be helpful sorts of practices. So I love all of the answers that are coming here. And it also just makes me think, Jordan, of like another part of the Seder, which is, the Talmud says, that we begin in a low place with the story and we, end in praise. And that's also part of this journey, right? Is working towards that and acknowledging that those low places and those narrow places, the constricted places exist. Like that's clearly also part of our teaching. So wonderful. All right. Well, we are at our time. There's always more to say, and I hope that everybody here will have a chance to come back tomorrow or some other time soon. And Jordan, we hope you'll come back soon. And in the meantime, wish everybody, thank you, Jordan, and wish everybody blessings for the journey.
Thanks, everybody.